we've been looking at 21 episodes, or 20 episodes so far, but it's going to be 21 total. And the whole concept is that I broke it down into 7 parts in the past. We looked at the idea of Babylon itself and how it started and what the nations were when they were dispersed. And then we looked at part 2, some of the weaponry that we can find through archaeology and through relics and through actual documented writings as far as what kind of weaponry they had. And they all shared. So all the different nations from India to Egypt, even up to Greece, they all shared this stuff. And then post-flood giants, we looked at that as well, as talking about some of the intellect that was passed over from the flood that the sons of Noah picked up and ran with. We also talked about ancient flying machines, some more of their advanced knowledge. Now, we actually got to a point in history here in 2022 where, I'm pretty sure that most people, they kind of know that the modern narrative that we were told in the past, as far as, we came crawling out of caves and then, suddenly, we started flourishing in civilizations. Most people are starting to realize that doesn't jive, right? That there's not a lot about that makes sense, especially when you look at etymology of languages and you realize there's just an explosion of languages about 4,000 years ago in the record books, and people can't figure out why. Well, the Bible tells us why. It's in Genesis 11. We were talking about that in the first 7 installments of the past. We also talked about Mount Olympus and the home of the gods. We talked about the chimera and scorpions and the king of Babylon itself. So very meaty information in the first 7 to kind of prep you for these concepts that we see from a biblical worldview. Because guys, remember, when we look at hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt or ancient Greece or the ancient Assyrians or the ancient Mesopotamians, that's your biblical age. It's the same people, the same time period. So we're reading this book that people try to segment and off into its own reality. They call it the Bible. But secular history wants to promote these other nations. Well, it's all the same people interacting. It's all the same concepts. We see in Jubilees 49, the king of Assyria, he came over and invaded the king of Egypt, took it over, and then he controlled all of Egypt during the days when the Israelites were in Goshen starting to be persecuted. He was the reason the persecution started towards them. This is all extremely relevant, right? So all the ancient hieroglyphs you see on TV when they do very boring documentaries and they talk about, the ancient Akkadians believed that this was there, and they attributed all their gods to natural things like the mountains and the volcanoes and the clouds and the rain, or they're actual people that ruled over them, like we required, and those people did what they said they could do and had the ability to do what they said they were doing, to rule over the people with power and with force. This is why we see all these miraculous moments throughout the scriptures where God has to step in and actually show them that what they considered power and force was really nothing in the eyes of him who created all things. So this is a perspective I hope we can remember going forward, that this is not, we're not talking fantasy land here. We're looking at literal characters, names, places, and events that lines up with all of accepted secular history, challenges some of secular history's ideas. And this is interwoven into the story of the creator following people that were trying to be faithful to him and how that worked out. So ultimately, we're still in this story. We're still in this story because at the end of it, the creator and his son show up on the earth, bring their massive house to the ground. There's peace on the earth. We don't have all these problems that we see on the earth today because we're still being ruled by the nations who are given allegiance to Ra, to the eye of Ra, right? To Satan, like we talked about in part 20. So that's why we looked at the modern time in the present. And we looked at how the remnants of the past are still being replicated in the present, like pyramids and temples, obelisks and domes. We looked at all the behavior that we see and can trace back to ancient Babylon and those kingdoms that we still see implored across the world today throughout the nations, the various practices, part 1 and 2 of the practices of Babylon. We also looked at the ministry of lies, which is, for example, NASA heading the tip of that spear, so to speak. I know other agencies across the world have spawned up in the last 40, 50 years to follow NASA's footsteps because they realized it's such an incredible money laundering scheme. But ultimately, this is the ministry of lies, right? To perpetuate a cosmology that is opposite of the Bible. Therefore, they get you to not believe in the God of the Bible. And they're also prepping the world with this cosmology for the fulfillment of the events of Revelation. So therefore, they are a very important component piece in the overarching Babylonian empire of the world, working its way to deceive the people through various means of physical trickery, so because they don't actually deal in biosciences as much, but as far as the physical tricks that the ancient priests used to do to fool the people, we now have NASA, which is why I called them the evil priesthood in that episode. We also talked about the ideas of conspiracy and mind control, how they'll get people to fear irrationally, as opposed to what God tells us, the truth of what's going to happen, so you know what to fear and what not to fear, right? So you can be properly warned and encouraged to know there's hope after the warning, right? That, yeah, we may go through a couple rough spots, but there's hope. He knows what's going to happen. And as it plays out, just as he said it is going to happen, he's in control, because he says, and after this happens, I'm going to do this to them. And we're going to talk about that tonight, the actual conflicts between Mother Babylon and the Spirit of God, whom is represented in Mother Jerusalem. So then we also talked about the CIA and military experiments, and that's how that's been implemented throughout our cultures, and who controls what and where they came from. And then we jumped into the prophecies of the end, right? Which is where we start looking deeply at how does all this play into what is going to come to fulfillment, what we see spoken by the Creator for the Father to tell us, his children, I don't want you to fear. I want you to understand these things must happen, because I'm going to show the entire world that I'm in control. These things truly are just trying to trick you and deceive you, and I'm going to shame all of them. And as I destroy them at a specific moment, we're going to be talking about that tonight. We also looked at the mark of the beast and the image of the beast. When does that come? The timeline qualifiers for that. So you don't have to think that every new advancement of technology and every new scheme of the devil is the mark of the beast. You don't have to be worrying about it. There's a specific time qualifier when that happens. The same thing with the image of the beast. Who is that? What is that? Why does he enforce people to take the mark? Why does he even force people to worship the first beast? We go over all that. We also looked at the ball top towers and how it played into episode 18, 19 and 20, where we looked at the eclipses. We broke those down, what possibly causes those, what that's spoken about in history, how the occultic elite of the world view that. And then we looked at Mother Babylon itself, where we look through scripture, history, and scientific modern observation, where we can see, oh yeah, there actually is a place where Satan himself has to go back home, right? There is a place where he currently resides. And that leads us to this episode, part 21, Evil Empire versus the Covenant Kingdom. Because there is a moment when the Father says, enough. I'm going to debase you. I'm going to bring you down to the ground. And so he takes the home and he destroys it. But he does it by announcing in Revelation 8:6 with the trumpet blast. And the 7 angels with the 7 trumpets prepared to sound them. Why? Why does the Father use the trumpet blast? It's a part of his Torah. It's a part of his behavior, his law. This is how he does things. When he announces that his warrior priests are about to go to battle, which is his nation, his people, he announces that battle blast with a trumpet. Numbers 10, 8-9. The sons of Aaron, the priests, are to sound the trumpets. This shall be a permanent statute for you and the generations to come. Why is it a permanent statute? Because the Father's ways are consistent. The law that he gave to mankind to follow on the earth is the same behavior that he keeps in heaven above. Obviously, all the ones that apply to him. This is why it says that his ways are eternal. His statutes, his righteous judgments, they're eternal. They don't go away. He does them himself. The angels abide by these same principles. This is why in Revelation 8, 7 angels are given 7 trumpets. The 7 spirits of God, this archangel set of entities, they're given 7 trumpets, and then they're going to round up other angels who are part of this warrior class, and they're going to do some things at different stages from the 42 months leading up to the return of the Messiah. This is all a part of the judgment enacted, not just on one nation, but the whole world. But of course, it's going to hit the head of the snake first. So here's why we say in Numbers 10, 8-9, we see this precedent given to Israel to follow. The sons of Aaron, the priests, are to sound the trumpets. This shall be a permanent statute for you and the generations to come. When you enter into battle in your land against an adversary who attacks you, sound short blasts on the trumpets, and you will be remembered before the Lord your God and saved from your enemies. Joshua 6:4, they do this. Have 7 priests carry 7 ram's horns in front of the ark. Then on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, while the priests blow the horns. So this was, even though the Israelites themselves, all they did was march around. They never shot an arrow from a bow. They never threw a javelin. They never used a catapult. They just walked around the city, but the priests announced that this was a battle. And I'm just can only imagine the earthquake that spawned was a result of what the Father did. Thank you guys for the super chats. I see some other super chats here. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Miss Marcia and Beverly. Thank you so much. So this is why we see this consistent pattern used in Scripture with the Israelites, because the angels in heaven do the same thing, and that's what they're going to be doing when the Father says it's time to judge Mother Babylon. In Job 38, 22 through 23, have you entered the storehouses of snow, or observed the storehouses of hail, which I hold in reserve for times of trouble, for the day of war and battle? So this is in Job's day. The Father says that he actually holds ice and hail and snow specifically in certain storehouses, which he drops for the day of battle. We also see in the Testament of Levi 1 through 3. Sorry, guys. It says, "Hear, therefore, regarding the heavens, which have been shown to you. The lowest is for this cause gloomy unto you, in that it beholds all the unrighteous deeds of men, and it has fire and snow and ice made ready for the day of judgment, and the righteous judgment of God. For in it are all the spirits of retributions for vengeance on men." So this is a moment where he's telling you, this is in the Testament of Levi. Levi is being shown a vision by an angel about the different layers of heaven, like you've talked about, the biblical creation model. The thing that tells you NASA is a fraud. It's the biblical creation model where there's multiple layers of firmament that encase us above. And directly, Levi was being shown that the first firmament layer directly above us has these areas, these compartments, these storehouses, where literal fire, snow, and ice are being kept for days of battle. And this is what we see happening in Joshua chapter 10, 9 through 11. After marching all night from Gilgal, Joshua caught them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel, who defeated them in a great slaughter at Gibeon. He pursued them all along the ascent to Beth-horon and struck them down as far as Azekah and Makkedah. As they fled before Israel along the descent from Beth-horon to Azekah, the Lord cast down on them large hailstones from the sky, and more of them were killed by the hailstones than by the swords of the Israelites. Guys, that's a huge claim. So the days of Joshua and this battle in Joshua chapter 10 against the Amorite, it wasn't just about the sun and moon standing still that gave them more time to fight. It was, how did the battle actually end? The Yahweh and his angels took these storehouses of hail and sniped the enemy from above, killing more of them than the Israelites did by the sword. This was the Father showing up for his people. Okay, judgment on the enemy. So the Israelites, yeah, they fought lots of battles in different times throughout history, but this particular one, they didn't have to. They didn't even get. They won the victory, but because the Lord helped them in this specific way, the angels allowed them. The angels themselves actually killed more people than the actual Israelites did by the sword. In Deuteronomy 29:32, Moses kind of recounts the idea of what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah. All its soil will be burning waste of sulfur and salt, unsown and unproductive, with no plant growing on it, just like the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim, which the Lord overthrew in his fierce anger. And as we know that story, he overthrew them with sulfur and fire. So just like in the Testament of Levi and in Job, these storehouses that are in the firmament above, mixed with fire, hail, hoarfrost, ice, snow, he uses these as a part of his creation as weapons. And he does it when judgment is ready. And this is kind of the part I just want to share with you guys. Just there's a precedent all throughout Scripture that comes a time when the Father says, all right, my judgment is ready. Just like in Revelation 8, when the seven angels receive the seven trumpets and they're ready to blow them, it's the time is about to come where this 42 months is about to start. And so that moment actually is one of the greatest humiliation moments for the enemy that kicks off this 42 months of tribulation across the world and persecution of the saints. Because Mother Babylon is thrown down. So it's kind of interesting that this is our typical view that we get, like of artists drawing ancient Babylon, the Tower of Babylon. But I thought it was funny that in some of my research for some of these episodes, I actually typed in the new mega city that Saudi Arabia is trying to build, which is Neom, which I don't think is going to be like, I don't think that's going to be like a future ground-based Babylon, but they're trying to build this new mega city in southern Saudi Arabia. It's called Neom, and when I typed in Neom, this is what Google presented to me, and I thought that was pretty hilarious because I typed in futuristic city of Neom, and instead of getting a futuristic city, one of the results came back and showed what looks like an ancient city built inside of a mountain with floating land masses above and something that isn't quite the moon, but I'm sure most people would just think that's the moon there in the top left. I just think that's pretty hilarious. But you also have the flying vehicles moving around all throughout. Whoever thought this was a artistic expression that should have been linked to the futuristic city of Neom, I thought that was pretty interesting. But real quick, let's look at something. As we're going to see, this is something that someone sent me after we did our last show. So after we did part 20, we had a lot of people that were surprised, if I should put it like that, at the actual conclusion of this series, right? As far as who's Mother Babylon, where is it been, what's going on, why is it still talked about in Revelation 18? Because that was, written approximately 2,000 years ago, but it's speaking in the future, leading up to the day and the return of Messiah, that Mother Babylon is destroyed. Yet in the last 2,000 years, we've never seen Mother Babylon on the earth again, right? Since, approximately 300 AD. But even then, it wasn't truly Rome. Already had, Rome was already being built in Italy, as far as the Roman Empire, and they were centralizing power there. So like the actual city of Babylon in Mesopotamia wasn't really a place of authority or a place for on the ground where it was being ruled from. So we talked about Mother Babylon and the difference there. So we're going to look at something real quick. This is actually something that was brought to my attention by someone who, after watching part 20, part 19 and 20, they then found this where supposedly this is an FAA weather advisory camera in Colorado. And there's a guy apparently he works this camera, and he's been uploading a couple videos, one in November of just 2 months ago, and then one last month in December, where he's noticed this weird anomaly on the government webcam, on the government camera that points toward the sky for weather advisories, right? As they look at different weather patterns that are coming and going. And I think it's pretty interesting that this guy is what he's claiming to have tracked, if I could put it like that. So let's look at this real quick. There's a couple quick videos. This one's about 3 minutes long. And he says, "Hi, everyone. This huge object or planet or orb you're about to see was spotted." Let me go back a little bit. He says it was spotted on the Wolf Creek Pass camera on the FFA WeatherCam website on November 17th of 2021. Guys, this is in southern Colorado. I've been keeping an eye on it for a few years now, and it seems to be getting larger or closer. So, guys, he's been monitoring this camera, according to this guy's testimony, and this new YouTube channel he just put up. He's been seeing this thing for years, and just now has decided maybe I should make some videos and show people what I've been seeing. I don't know if he's talked to his supervisors about it. I don't know. I don't want to give out his name. I don't want to give him trouble. You can go try to find this on YouTube yourself, but I just think it's fascinating that he's putting up a government camera, unfiltered, and he's seeing something he can't explain. So he goes on to say, there's no editing to this, but these are actual images that he took stills of and then put them together to show a time lapse. He says it can be seen on clear days looking south, but recently they've been trying to hide and obscure it using the chemtrails. What do you guys think it could be? Please comment and let me know. So he starts, what you're going to see is an actual time lapse of photos. You guys see something? Still going. I know it's kind of slow. Maybe we'll do 2 times the speed here. You guys see this? You guys see this? I want you to notice. Now, I know I can hear it already, right? There's people in the crowd be like, oh my goodness, it's just a water spot on the camera, Sean. How dare you? I can't believe this. Guys, look, there's literally a hot spot on the top left of it where the sun's passing overhead. This is not a watermark. This guy's been seeing this for years and has been tracking it. And it has this strange pot-marked looking outer design, which almost looks symmetrical to me, as if it was this intentional design. You can see the hot spot on the top right of it as the sun goes overhead. This is not a watermark, guys. This is, in fact, here's a watermark. I don't know if you can see it right here. This is an actual glare, a sun flare. And that's going to go away as this thing stays in frame. So the whole point about this is that there's, the elite technology of the world, they've had forms of cloaking technology for a long time. We talked about this in the previous two installments. So if you haven't seen part 19 and 20, please go watch that. So this is just what some guy, he thinks, of course, he doesn't, I doubt the guy that's putting up this, he's calling it Planet X and Nibiru, which is what a lot of people would say. I understand that, but you can see the clouds are passing in front of it because it's way off in the distance as well. Okay. So let's look at one more of his videos real quick. We're going to look at something real quick. Okay. So this is the same thing. This one was posted just last month. The first one was posted 2 months ago. This one was posted last month. And so it's a different time period. And this is the same camera. And I got it playing at double speed. I think I do. Nope, I don't. All right. So this one's only 2 minutes long. But here it comes again. Pretty interesting, huh? Pretty interesting. I personally don't think that's why they're doing the chemtrails, but I think there's a whole other reason why they're doing for what we talked about in part 11, as far as their weather modification. This has always been a part of the claim of ancient Babylon to have power over the weather. It's pretty fascinating, huh? Pretty fascinating. Now, take a look at this, what we just looked at. And let's look at this real quick, guys. So this is the something that's being spotted with this very consistent, unique pattern in it. It looks like it's got pothole marks in it, right? This is not the moon. I promise you guys. I should have made a clip of Star Wars with Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's no moon. So this is not the moon. Do you guys see the darkened image in the center of this seemingly transparent holographic thing? You guys remember we talked about some of the symbolism of the hieroglyphs for ancient Ra? It wasn't just the sun. He eclipses the sun. This is the whole point of Ra. He was the one that supposedly followed the sun through the sky on his boat of a million years, and his symbol was he eclipsed the sun. So as you can see, there's a little knobby thing in the center of this hieroglyph of this carved out area that's supposed to be a sun. Well, that seems to be what I can see from this little vague imagery of this FAA weather camera from Colorado that has some sort of area in the center of it. It's pretty interesting. So it's right there, just in case you can't see it. So guys, there comes a day, there comes a moment where the Father says, I've had enough. He's been sitting high and mighty, and I'm tired of it. And I'm going to initiate the process to where he freaks out goes overboard, transgresses my law, and I'm going to come back and root everything out. So this is why we're currently in what's called the time of the Gentiles. It's not the Father's will that any should perish, but that all should come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. So this is what was prophesied, right? After Yeshua sins, he becomes our high priest. And in the meantime, there's this time of the Gentiles until his second coming, where his people go out and spread the word to all nations, near and far, Isaiah 57:19. This was prophesied of our Messiah and what would happen after him, so that the Father could reach as many people as possible. Meanwhile, Satan knows he has time. He has time to enact great deceptions. But he is not all-knowing. He's not the Father. He's just an angel. And even though he definitely is more intelligent probably than the average man, because he knows more, he's been around longer, literally, he's still not as powerful as a father. He doesn't control all things, but he wants to make you think he does. How fitting that he would put his home in the sky to traverse the sun, to get in front of the sun. So everyone in the world could know he's still there, and that he still rules from on high. So there comes a time when the Father says, I'm done. In Daniel 12:1, at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands watch over your people, will rise up. Who's Michael? He's a archangel priest of God. Trumpet gets blown. From the 7 trumpets start being blown. And the specific trumpet, the first one blows hail and fire from the sky and blood. Second trumpet, large mountain falling out of the sky, burning and on fire. At that time, Michael, the great prince who stands watch over your people, will rise up. There will be a time of distress, the likes of which will not have occurred from the beginning of nations until that time. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. So this is initiating the 42 months leading up to the time of Yeshua. Michael stands up. That whole concept of him rising up means he's coming up in battle. He's said enough is enough. He's going to make a stand. He's going to actually address the enemy. This is why we see in Revelation 12, there's a war in heaven, like we talked about in part 20. Michael fights Satan. Jesus doesn't get involved in this part of the battle yet. He's coming 42 months later. Just like the precedent we see in all throughout Scripture. The Father and the Son don't get involved. They don't always come down and do everything. I know that's a very popular theory that Jesus just came down and did everything. He's everywhere. But that's not what the Scriptures tell us. He has all these mighty, powerful angels who are more powerful than Satan on Satan's best day. The least probably, I mean, they can't handle him, which is why they lose this battle in Revelation 7. And they're cast to the earth. Satan is furious. He knows his time is short. I should say Revelation 12, 7 through 13. I said the wrong verse. So that's why Michael fights him. And that's why then all this other 42 months of nonsense happens. And Satan persecutes the children of God, keep the commandments and the testimony of Jesus. So that means later, Jesus is going to come back. So this is why Daniel would tell us in a short summation, Michael stands up, there's great persecution, then your people are delivered. That's the resurrection. So this Daniel 12:1 encompasses the entire 42 months in a short summation. Michael stands up, attacks Satan. Satan's thrown down. Satan persecutes the world. There's a time of great distress like none other. Because he lost his home. In Revelation 18, 1 through 3, he cried out in a mighty voice. That was a mighty angel. He cried out in a mighty voice, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a lair for demons and a haunt for every unclean spirit, every unclean bird, and every detestable beast. It's literally telling us this whole time that Mother Babylon, not only does she fall, but she's become a lair for demons. It's an unclean spirits. I mean, we know what those are. This doesn't require interpretation. We know the definitions of these terms. It's literally telling us this whole time. Just as Paul refers to the Ephesians, trying to help them remember this is our struggle. It's not against flesh and blood. It's against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of the world's darkness. And then we talked last week about that idea of the word cosmic, which does mean the ruling spirits in the air over mankind, this cosmic powers, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. That's in this high in the sky above us. Beneath our firmament, though, that's still considered the heaven above, is the high altitude, the sky above us. This is what Paul has been saying, Revelation has been saying this whole time. This is where these evil spiritual forces, the world's darkness, this is where they've been hanging out this whole time. Think about, they're just into, they don't have all knowledge. This is, I guess, the kind of thing I hope to stress, guys, to try to take the, the boogeyman aspect out of this, because the Father's in control. These things do not have all knowledge. They're not interdimensional. They're literally just, they have the ability to trick you, right? But they are a physical entity of some regard, and they have to be dealt with, just like they can physically move inside your body, well, they can physically go somewhere else. Just like they can physically talk to Jesus, and they know when the appointed time is going to happen, which is why they were trying to mock Jesus and say, have you come to torment us before the appointed time? So they know the story, and they have a place where they can go reside. This is why we went through in part 20 and also in part 3 and part 7, and we went through it multiple times. Satan was given control of unclean spirits. Satan has just been chilling in his little house, Mother Babylon, high in the air for a long time. And Revelation tells us, Paul tells us, this is where unclean spirits hang out too. Specifically, I would say the ones that are in higher authority, right? Because we know the other ones are on the ground, right? Trying to get into people, trying to possess and oppress people. Luke 12, Matthew 12 talks about that as well. But ultimately, they have their own chain of authority, their own hierarchy. Well, that means they meet somewhere to talk about their evil plans, if I could put it like that. I know it sounds cliche, but hey, reality is reality. This is the way it happens. A house divided against itself cannot stand, like Jesus said. Even the enemy has to have an authority structure that is obeyed for him to accomplish his evil doings. Otherwise, he would have no command over his minions, and they would just go out and do whatever they wanted, and he'd never get anything accomplished. All practical logistics for any command structure is they have a home base. They have an actual place where they can strategize, talk, come back to. But when that base is destroyed, now the people that used to inhabit that base are displaced. And they're running around angry since they can't go through the firmament and they can't attack. They already lost the battle against the angels, so they know they can't win that one. So now they go after the weaker vessels, the children of the Almighty. Those who are the children of God, keep the commandments and the testimony of Jesus. And those are not two different groups, by the way. That's the same group of people with two qualifying descriptions. Yes, all those who keep the testimony of Jesus or Yeshua should also keep the commandments of God. That's part of your discipleship. So ultimately, guys, what we're doing is we're looking at the grand battle of all time, of all the story of life, since the beginning. We're looking at the battle of two kingdoms, Mother Babylon versus Mother Jerusalem. Oh, thank you for the super chats. I think someone else dropped one. Lisa Mendez. Thank you. Yes, I am going to be making putting these on either a thumb drive or DVD. I already had some people that asked me to send it out to them, and it's just I just gotta clip them and yeah, I'm gonna be doing something with them. I'll make an announcement as soon as I have a better bearing on how I'm gonna do that. So, but guys, ultimately, this is the battle of two kingdoms, Mother Jerusalem or Mother Babylon, and it's happened since the beginning. People just don't realize it because many people don't understand what the Garden of Eden was. They don't realize it was its own kingdom. They don't realize that it was on the ground and it was retracted into the firmament. It comes back as a new Jerusalem because they don't understand the biblical creation model. So therefore, they don't know what they're reading in Genesis 3. Genesis 3, 14 and 15. So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you've done this, cursed are you above all livestock and every beast of the field. On your belly you will go, and dust you will eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He will crush your head, you will strike his heel. I've heard lots of interpretations about what this is. The whole consistent usage of the term seed throughout Scripture is what behavior are you doing? Just like Jesus tries to explain to us in John 8. If you are children of Abraham, you will do the deeds of Abraham. And therefore, he doesn't say this. I'm adding this to explain the idea of the exegete, because then you would be of the seed of Abraham. It's like those who do the commandments of God are the children of God. 1 John 2. The Satan character who deceives people into doing anti-lawful behavior, they become his seed to perpetuate that on the earth. And there is natural enmity between his seed and the seed of the woman, which is why his seed always persecutes the seed of the woman, the children of the woman. Who's the woman? It's not just her. I know a lot of people want to make this about Jesus, and I know a lot of people are probably going to get angry at me saying this because they've always thought this is a messianic prophecy. Because they think it's talking about Mary. They think it's talking about Eve, basically, right? But I'm trying to let you know that the implication of the idea of the seed, it's not just about your offspring. It's not just about Eve and her offspring specifically, because her offspring is where we get the seed of Satan as well, right? The idea of people that do Satan's behavior. And no, I don't subscribe to serpent seed theory, right? I've done entire videos on that. Please go search my channel for it. I'm talking about behavior. I'm not talking about physical sex. I'm talking about behavior. The behavior of the enemy is to fool people to do his behavior, which is anti-lawful, is anti-Christ behavior. The behavior of the seed of whom? Of Eve? Just her? Or is it Mary? The Catholics will take, oh, it must be Mary. No, it's Mother Jerusalem. It's the kingdom of the garden. The very place they were standing when they're having this conversation. This has been one kingdom against the next, against the kingdom of the evil empire. Satan everyone he perpetuates to do his behavior. It's been that kingdom against the kingdom of the children of Zion, those of righteousness who want to do what's right because they want to live in their home, mother above, right? They want to live in that's the modern day, but in this moment when it was still on the ground, you understand. This is why we've talked about Enoch being taken into the Garden of Eden before it was retracted into the firmament. All this sounds crazy if you don't understand what the Bible tells you that God made for his creation. You're not on a ball in space. That was brought to you by people who reject the Father and the Son and continue to reject the Father and the Son. That hopelessness is brought to you for deception. The Bible tells you a totally different story, but you were created with specific intentionality and purpose. The luminaries were created to shine down on the earth, which for your good, for your purposes, right? So you can know how to follow the calendar of God, do the behavior of God, and let things flourish from the daylight. It was for your purpose. It wasn't a random choice. It wasn't random accident. And you're not going to die a supernova heat death from the sun in 200,000 years. The Father has good things in store for you. He just needs you to believe what he's plainly said and realize the enemy's lied to you. So even all the way back in Genesis 3, we have the Father announcing right out the gate, which I believe is actually just an angel there, is giving the words from the Father to Adam and Eve and the serpent, just announcing that, yeah, there's going to be enmity between these two different camps. So let's dive in a little bit deeper. Let's look at Matthew 13, because our Messiah also expounds on this same concept, okay? In Matthew 13, 36 through 39, Jesus dismissed the crowds and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." And he replied, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, The kingdom, the good seed represents the sons of the kingdom. The sons of the kingdom. The good seed represents the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. So let's stay with the metaphor real quick, all right? Jesus is telling you that the one who sows good seed is the Son of Man, and the field is the world. And the good seed represents the sons of the kingdom, not the sons of the Son of Man. So for all the serpent seed believers out there, Jesus did not have a bunch of babies and say, I'm sowing seed into the world so I can fill my kingdom. This is kind of the general premise that we hear the serpent seed doctrine nonsense that is perpetuated. Satan didn't literally have kids. So what Yeshua is trying to tell us is that those who follow the Son of Man become sons of the kingdom. It's the same thing that 1 John 2 says. You become sons of the kingdom. You get a part of the covenant promises, which you get to live in the New Jerusalem. Sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one. The enemy sowed the weeds, and they're considered sons of the devil. And the harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are the angels. So he tells us, and he explains the metaphor as he's explaining it, as he tells it, right? He's explaining it to his disciples. He goes on to say, 40 through 43, as the weeds are collected and burned in the fire, so will be at the end of the age. So that's what we're going to see at the end of the 42 months when the Son actually returns, and all the angels come back with fire, and they're destroying all the enemies that try to fight them on the ground, not in the host of heaven above, like we talked about last week with Isaiah 24, verse 21 through 24. But on the ground is when the battle happens, when at the end of the 42 months. There's a battle that happens in the sky at the beginning of the 42 months, so that he can put everything on the ground. Do you remember what the promise was? And in Psalm 110, 1 through 4, sit at my right hand until I place all your enemies under your feet. And then when Yeshua comes back, everybody's centralized in the Middle East trying to fight him at his return. So at the beginning of the 42 months, the devil, who sows seeds into the world and creates sons of the devil, he's thrown down to the ground. Father's going to make it a level playing. He's going to equalize and make it a level playing field. So he goes on to explain that the Son of Man will send out his angels. They will weed out of his kingdom every cause of sin and all who practice lawlessness. That's all the sons of the evil one. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has an ear, let him hear. Obviously, he was referring to a lot of things that take place over time in this process at the end of the age, even leading to the resurrected being inside the kingdom with the Father, right? So this is a beautiful parable to give you the dichotomy that's been with us since Genesis 3. But because people don't understand the kingdom of the garden, that always was a kingdom. It's not just some tree, some peach orchard that encompasses an acre or two that Adam and Eve lived in. It was an absolute walled off, enclosed kingdom, a garden with its own temple inside, with its own, we've gone over this in great detail on this channel. It's called Kingdom of the Garden. I think it's like episode 36. Go check it out if you have, but I didn't have time to go into it with this because I've been trying to build everything up to help you understand the dichotomy between the two kingdoms has been around this whole time. It's the whole backdrop of the scriptures. It's two kingdoms born against each other. Revelation 18, 1 through 3. After this, I saw another angel descending from heaven with great authority, and the earth was illumined by his glory. He cried out in a mighty voice, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a lair for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, and every unclean bird, every detestable beast. All the nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her immorality. The kings of the earth were immoral with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown wealthy from the extravagance of her luxury. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins or contract any of her plagues. For her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Give back to her as she has done to others. Pay her back double for what she has done. Mix her a double portion in her own cup. As much as she has glorified herself and lived in luxury, give her the same measurement of torment and grief. In her heart, she says, I sit as a queen. I'm not a widow. I'll never see grief. Did you guys know that the angel's actually partially quoting something from Isaiah? When it says, I sit as a queen, I'm not a widow, and I will never see grief. We're going to read that in Isaiah. Did you guys know that was already in Isaiah? We're going to read that in just a minute. Therefore, her plagues will come in one day, death and grief and famine, and she'll be consumed by fire. For mighty is the Lord God who judges her. Then the kings of the earth who committed sexual morality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail at the sight of her smoke rising from the fire that consumes her. In the fear of her torment, they stand at a distance and cry out, Woe, woe to the great city, the mighty city of Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come, and the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, because there's no one left to buy their cargo of gold, silver, precious stones, and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet, all kinds of wood, citron, articles of ivory, precious woods, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, olive oil, fine flour, and wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. We talked about that as well. And they will say, the fruit of your soul's desire has departed from you. All your luxury and splendor has vanished, never to be seen again. The merchants who sold these things and grew their wealth from her will stand at a distance in fear of her torment. That means they saw her destruction. They will weep and mourn, saying, Woe, woe to the great city, clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in a single hour, such fabulous wealth has been destroyed. Every shipmaster, passenger, and sailor, all who make their living from the sea, will stand at a distance and cry out at the sight of the smoke rising from the fire that consumes her. What city was ever like this great city? They will exclaim. Then they will throw dust on their heads as they weep and mourn and cry out, Woe, woe to the great city, where all who had ships on the sea were enriched by her wealth, for in a single hour she has been destroyed. Rejoice over her, O heaven, O saints, and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced for you his judgment against her. Then a mighty angel picked up a stone the size of a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, With such violence the great city of Babylon will be cast down, never to be seen again. The sound of the harpist and musician, of flute players and trumpeters, will never ring out in you again, nor will any craftsman of any trade be found in you again, nor the sound of a millstone be heard in you again. The light of a lamp will never shine in you again. The voices of a bride and a bridegroom will never call out in you again. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. And there was found in her the blood of prophets and saints and all who have been slain on the earth. So this is a big claim, guys. Of all who have been slain on the earth, in you was found the blood of prophets and saints and all who was slain on the earth. I know a lot of people would be thinking, well, yeah, I agree, Sean, that this is definitely not a city from the past, because clearly it's talking about the city being destroyed before the coming of the Son of Man. But what if it's just a new city like Neom that they build on the ground, in the future? What if it's, what if they just actually revitalize, a city over in Mesopotamia somewhere in Iran or something? What if it's New Jerusalem? What if it is Jerusalem? We hear people say that all the time, right? It's modern day Jerusalem. Because they look at the mixture of Illuminati and the Freemasonry and the Catholic affiliation and the Rothschilds and all that stuff, and they think, oh, modern day Jerusalem must be Mother Babylon, it must be Mystery Babylon. Because they'll use this one as well. They'll use verse 24. They'll say, because in her was found the blood of prophets and saints and all who've been slain on the earth. But that's not accurate, right? That doesn't mean the same thing. But not everybody was slain in Jerusalem. Sure, there were some prophets and saints that were killed, but not all of them were killed in Jerusalem. And all who were slain on the earth are not killed in Jerusalem. Now, they're not physically killed in what I'm suggesting is Mother Babylon either, to be the Satan's dragon lair in the sky. Yes, clearly you would say, well, they were responsible for this. Okay, well, if that's the case, then it definitely is not ground-based Jerusalem, because ground-based Jerusalem was overthrown and non-existent for 1,800 years while people were killing each other. And even when it was alive, it was overthrown by other countries, the Assyrians and the Babylonians, while they were going out killing people. And that was not the fault of people in Jerusalem. Mother Babylon is not ground-based Jerusalem. So it's funny. I was there's a really popular show. There's a really popular show that people talk about. It's this show called Dexter, and I think it's funny because I think about verse 24 here, where it says, "And in her were the blood of the prophets and saints, and all who've been slain on the earth." And I'm not suggesting that's what it's saying. I just think it's funny. It makes me think of like Satan's up there like Dexter with a bunch of blood slides, where he takes like a drop of their blood and puts them on a little slide, and he like catalogs them, and he's got like billions of things, in his house of all the people that he's all the people of men that he's killed or been responsible for killing. I just think that's funny thought of him being up there like a complete OCD about it, and just so there it's like almost as if he will be called to account for everything he's done and for everything that's been like the damage, the destruction, the death that has resulted from everything that he's caused on the earth. Yeshua called him a murderer and a liar from the beginning. So I think it's interesting to me that his home gets claimed for this concept of the bloods of the prophet and the saints and all who are slain on the earth. Like this is Leviticus 16, the Azazel scapegoat, right? The sins are put on that. That's First Enoch 9, right? Like all sin is ascribed to Satan, to Azazel. It's an interesting thought. So we were just reading about Mother Babylon in the future, the prophetic version given to us by the angel through the revelation to John, explained in Revelation 18. But let's go look at the similar wording we see in Isaiah 47, back during the days of Isaiah, approximately 700 BC. Go down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. So what have we been talking about, guys? We're going to get into the comparison here. We just looked at Mother Babylon. Look, the ground-based Babylon in Isaiah's day, just over the other side of the Euphrates to the east. That ground-based city was referred to in Isaiah as daughter Babylon. Just think about that for a minute. So in Isaiah 47, 1 through 3, it says, Go down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, O daughter of Chaldea. For you will no longer be called tender or delicate. Take millstones and grind flour. Remove your veil. Strip off your skirt. Bare your thigh. Wade through the streams. Your nakedness will be uncovered, and your shame will be exposed. I will take vengeance. I will spare no one. Our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, is his name. He is the Holy One of Israel. Sit in silence and go down into darkness, O daughter of Chaldea, for you will no longer be called the Queen of Kingdoms. I was angry with my people. I profaned my heritage. I placed them under your control. You showed them no mercy. Even on the elderly, you laid a most heavy yoke. So now we have qualifiers, guys. We know he's talking about the ground-based Jerusalem, the Assyrians who were invaded. The Assyrians, which a lot of people I've talked about this in the past, don't realize the capital of Babylon was moved to Assyria. The kingdom of Assyria, the kingdom of Babylon, synonymous. And the Assyrian king invaded in, I think, 2 Kings chapter 15, invaded first the tribe of Naphtali and northern house of Israel, and then took out the rest of the northern tribes. The southern house, which is an amalgamation of Judah, Levi, Simeon, and Benjamin, they were still in the land of Israel, so to speak, and had not been invaded until like 100 years later, when Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian from Babylon itself came over with an army and invaded them later. So the days of Isaiah is in between those two invasion points. Okay, so this is the northern house had already been invaded by Babylon, and this is why it says, I placed them under your control. I profaned my heritage. I placed them under control. This is part of the covenant promise that if Israel rejected his covenant and started worshiping Baals, he would scatter them from the land by the hand of their enemies. And this is what happened. The Assyrians came in and scattered the northern house, sent them out to all 127 different provinces under the control of Babylon. And he said, you showed them no mercy. You laid on a really heavy yoke on them. You said, I will be a queen forever. You did not take these things to heart to consider their outcome. So now hear this. O lover of luxury who sits securely, you who says to yourself, I am and there's none besides me. I will never be a widow or know the loss of children. How interesting is that? So in this moment, when Babylon thinks that it's about to take over the children of Zion, the children of the kingdom on the ground based as it plays out on the ground. She says to herself, I'll never be a widow. They're a widow. And I'll explain that verse in a minute as we go into Isaiah 54. Mother Jerusalem is referred to as a widow. Mother Babylon boasts, I'll never be a widow. I'll never lose my children. This is a catty metaphor between two women, right? These two things will overtake you in a moment. In a single day, you have a loss of children and widowhood. They will come upon you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and the potency of your spells. You were secure in your wickedness, and you said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and knowledge led you astray, and you told yourself, I am, and there's none besides me. But disaster will come upon you. You will not know how to charm it away. A calamity will befall you that you will be unable to ward off. Devastation will happen to you suddenly and unexpectedly. So take your stand with your spells and with your many sorceries, with which you weary yourself from your youth. Perhaps you will succeed. Perhaps you will inspire terror. He's mocking, by the way. You were wearied by your many counselors. Let them come forward now and save you. Your astrologers who observe the stars, you monthly predict your fate. Surely they are like stubble. The fire will burn them up. They cannot deliver themselves from the power of the flame. There will be no coals to warm them or fire to sit beside. This is what they are to you, those with whom you've labored and traded from youth. Each one strays in his own direction. Not one of them can save you. So that's just to give you the idea that the dichotomy, right? Of there's a mother Babylon, there's a daughter Babylon. Daughter Babylon was destroyed, just as Yahweh prophesied. Jeremiah 51:53, a little later, about 80 years past Isaiah, Jeremiah says, for this is what the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel says, the daughter of Babylon is like a threshing floor at the time it is trampled. In just a little while, her harvest will come. Psalm 137:8, O daughter of Babylon, doomed to destruction, blessed is he who repays you as you have done to us. You see that? You see the consistency of the use of the language? There's a daughter on the ground. There's a mother in the sky. Revelation 17:5, and on her forehead, on the forehead of the harlot, was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Because this is where they give their allegiance, is to Mother Babylon in the sky. This is where they've always given their allegiance. This is the battle of the two kingdoms. Zechariah 9, we get some of the dichotomy of Jerusalem on the ground. Zechariah 9:9-10. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, humble and riding on a donkey, on the colt, on the foal of a donkey. And what I love about this, guys, is this is actually a prophecy about Yeshua's first coming. So it even 100% lets you know. He first came to Jerusalem on the ground, riding on the colt of a donkey. Actually, there was two donkeys involved, but, we won't get into the semantics of that. So you see the idea here that the separation says, and I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem. The bow of war will be broken. Then he will proclaim peace to the nations. His dominion will extend from sea to sea and from the Euphrates to the ends of the earth. They just didn't realize that there was going to be a massive separation of time, which is called the time of the Gentiles, in between verse 9 and 10 in Zechariah chapter 9. His first coming humble and lowly, riding on colt of a donkey. And then the second time he comes shattering the nations who try to war against him and creating peace on the earth, from sea to sea, to the ends of the earth even. Now, interesting that it mentions the Euphrates in this passage. It's interesting to me. So you have the double prophecy of Yeshua here, both his first and second coming, in one paragraph of Zechariah's prophecy. You just have to know the context of what's being spoken about, right? Just like we saw in Daniel 12:1, Michael stands up. That's the moment of Revelation 12:7-10. There's persecution. That's the 42 months. And then the resurrected saints appear. And that's the day of the Lord. Prophecy does this. You just have to know the context, right? Isaiah 54:1. Shout for joy, O barren woman, who bears no children. What was Isaiah 47? What was it mocking? What was what was the land-based daughter Babylon mocking in Isaiah 47? Was that she's not a widow. She doesn't lose her children. And here in Isaiah 54, speaking to Zion, that's Mother Jerusalem. It says, "Shout for joy, O barren woman, who bears no children. Break forth in song and cry aloud, you have never travailed, because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband." So it's telling Mother of Jerusalem in a metaphoric fashion that you are a barren woman, you don't have any children, but it says cry aloud, break forth in song. That's a good thing. That's joyfulness. Break forth in song and cry aloud, you, Zion, who have never travailed. Because why should you be excited? Why should you break forth in song? Because more will be the children of the desolate woman. She's considered barren and desolate at this time. But it's a promise to Zion saying, you will have more children than the one who has a husband. This is actually personified language to a city, saying to the city, the bride of Jesus, to the city of God, the New Jerusalem, in Isaiah, to encourage her, you will have more children than Mother Babylon. Galatians 4:26-27. But the Jerusalem above is free, and she is our mother. Mother Jerusalem versus Mother Babylon. That's the big, overarching, long-standing story throughout time. On the ground, there's been skirmishes amongst daughter Jerusalem and daughter Babylon, and daughter Babylon's been winning for a long time. But that's going to stop. So Paul is trying to remind you that the Jerusalem above is free. This is because you'll be resurrected. When you get to her, you're resurrected, and you got the law permanently in your heart. It's a law of freedom, and you never have to be enslaved to sin again. And that is our mother. The Jerusalem above, the one that comes down out of the firmament in Revelation 21. You guys see the dichotomy here. Isaiah 54, 2-3. Enlarge the sight. So now we're talking to Zion still. We're still talking to Mother Jerusalem. Isaiah 54. The whole chapter is talking to Zion. It says, enlarge the sight of your tent. Stretch out the curtains of your dwellings. Do not hold back. Lengthen your ropes and drive your stakes in deep. For you will spread out to the right and left, and your descendants will dispossess the nations and inhabit the desolate cities. So when the New Jerusalem sets down, it's going to set down over many modern-day land boundaries of nations. And they will be dispossessed. All of them will be pushed out. That's Matthew 13, 49-51. The angels come down and separate the wicked from the righteous. Because the home where the New Jerusalem sets down is the place of the righteous. And everyone who commits lawlessness has to get out of that way. Verse 4-5, do not be afraid, for you will not be put to shame. Do not be intimidated, for you will not be humiliated. For you will forget the shame of your youth. What shame? When did Zion above ever have shame in her youth? Oh, that's right. Her only two children. Well, they technically weren't her children, right? She never travailed. Adam and Eve were created from the dust of the earth and then taken inside the Zion, inside the kingdom of the garden. And then Genesis 3:24, when they transgressed, they were kicked back out to the land to where they were created. So technically, she's never been responsible yet for having children. But she will. We're going to talk about that in a minute. It says, for you will forget the shame of your youth, and you will remember no more the reproach of your widowhood. Oh, so then she went into covenant with Adam and Eve when they went into her. And that covenant was broken when Adam and Eve were expelled from her. This is why in Isaiah 62, Zion is referred to in your God, your Elohim, will go into covenant with you, will marry you. Your children will go into covenant with you. They'll marry you. That's why it uses that language in Isaiah 62, 4 and 5. Because at the resurrection, we get to go back into live in her land. And this is when we strike a covenant with her to live in her land. It's a part of the covenant promise of the new covenant. This is why she will forget her shame. She'll never remember more the reproach of her widowhood when she, unfortunately lost her husband, right? This is not talking about Yeshua, guys. For your husband is your maker. Think about this for a minute. It's beautiful. The Lord of hosts is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. It's pretty amazing, right? Get this beautiful dichotomy. The idea that this person, this character in the scriptures, it gets overlooked all the time, and it's literally the place where we're going to spend eternity, the New Jerusalem. Was called the garden, often referred to as Zion, or the holy mountain of God, or the mountain of the Lord in the prophets. And it is the city that which Abraham looked for in Hebrews 11, 10 through 14. The city whom he knew, the city whose architect and builder was God. This is the New Jerusalem that he waited for, a heavenly country. This has been the backdrop of the prophets and the law and the promise of the covenant this whole time. This is why the enemy, sons of the devil, who sows seed of evil in the world, right, getting people to do behavior that's opposite of the kingdom behavior. This is why there's always been that clash. There's always been that friction. It's a warring of two kingdoms. Isaiah 66, 7 through 9. This is the beautiful moment of promise being spoken when the Zion actually gets to have children. Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before she was in pain, she delivered a boy. That is Yeshua. Before she travailed, she brought forth a boy. It's pretty interesting, right? That's Yeshua. He was birthed of the Spirit, the first resurrection. When he resurrected from the dead, was given his new incorruptible body, first fruits of the first resurrection, 1 Corinthians 15, 20 through 24. This is why he is initiated or inaugurated in the new covenant, because he's the first one to step into it. This is why he can go to Zion and prepare a place for us. So before she actually travailed in labor, she gave birth to a boy. Who has heard of such a thing as this? Sounds, even within the metaphor, it sounds kind of weird, right? Who has seen such things? And then it goes on to say, can a country be born in a day, or a nation be delivered in an instant? Yet, and this is rhetorical because it's about to say, yes, this is how it's going to happen. Yet, as soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her children, plural. Shall I bring a baby? And this is, again, Yahweh being rhetorical. Shall I bring a baby to the point of birth and not deliver it, says the Lord? Or will I deliver close to the womb? Or will I who deliver close the womb, says your God? So he's saying, this is a rhetorical fashion of Hebrew writing where they're basically saying, of course not. Of course not. It's going to happen. This will absolutely happen. As soon as Zion goes into labor, she gave birth to her children, plural. It's a nation born in a day, delivered in an instant. This is the resurrection. This is why Yeshua is the first fruits of the first resurrection. He's the one delivered without labor and just a single boy. But then the entire nation is born in a single day. This is the seventh trumpet, day of the Lord, the day of the great resurrection of the saints. This is called the first resurrection event at the seventh trumpet. This is what initiates. It's at the end of the 42 months. So Zion, the promise gets fulfilled to her that she will have children, and they'll be more than the children of the married woman. Because all those are going to be destroyed. They'll be taken out of the game. The second death, lake of fire. So they won't be around at some point. So yeah, she is actually going to have more children alive and inside her and join her land, her spacious land, as Isaiah 33 talks about. And Mother Babylon will be destroyed, and all of her children will be destroyed. How beautiful of a promise is this? Just to try to share it with you. Like, this has been going on this whole time. And the Father, while he sends his prophets to encourage us, he actually mentions the garden that he made and placed in Eden, which he then retracted as 2 Ezra 7:26. He retracted during the time of the flood. He's going to bring it back after he enlarges it, stretches out those tent pegs, makes it bigger. It's got to accommodate everyone that's going to be born in an instant, an entire nation, everyone from the first resurrection event. As Hebrews 11, 39 through 40 says, that they receive their promises with us at the same time together. Everyone's born in an instant. We follow in. Yeshua's already there. He's prepared the place. He got it ready for us. It's a beautiful story. I'm sorry. In verse 10 and 11, he goes, say, be glad for Jerusalem and rejoice over her, all who love her. Rejoice greatly with her, all who mourn over her. so that you may nurse and be satisfied at her comforting breast. You may drink deeply and delight yourselves in her glorious abundance. This is obviously metaphor, because we'll have everything we need inside the New Jerusalem. A land flowing with milk and honey. And guys, this is what I will be expounding upon the 42 months leading up to the resurrection of the saints and the day of the Lord, with a future series called 42, Countdown to Messiah. And we'll go over the prophecies within that 42 months taking place on the earth, the trumpets, the seals, the bowl judgments, with great depth. So this is my surprise announcement here at the end of the show, is just to tell you that we'll have a new series later this year. I got several other things I got to accomplish first, but later this year, we'll have a new series called 42, Countdown to Messiah. And we'll systematically, just like we did with this series, we'll systematically go over the 42 months from the moment that Mother Babylon is thrown down and Satan gets ticked off and starts persecuting the children of the kingdom, and everything that takes place during that, to hopefully provide to you like a systematic breakdown of things, to give you an opportunity to share as a companion. And I kind of prefaced this idea back in part 15 when I went over Prophecies of the End, and I tried to, in a large overview fashion, break down the 42 months with the trumpet, seal, and bowl judgments. But I'm going to spend an entire series and go just like super in depth on all those, so that you can have something to share with people, right? Because a lot of people get, they get really tripped up on the timing, right? And they don't understand what we try to show them. Fifth trumpet, 42 months. That's when things really kick off. That's I shouldn't say that. Fifth trumpet. That's when Apollion's let out. The trumpets happen at the 42 months, and there's the 5 that happen at the beginning of the 42 months. That's when things really kick off. But the seals, I go check out part 15. I don't want to go back in that whole teaching, but again, that's why we're going to break it down, because there's a lot of people stumble on it and trip up on it. So I just want to encourage you guys.